Joining us on our Book Talk segment, great to welcome a man who's written a very helpful book, I'm sure, as we've all been going through this thing for the past year, and a lot of people dealing with anxiety. That's the part of the title of the book, called Unwinding Anxiety. New science shows how to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your mind. We're joined today by Dr. Judson Brewer. And he is a renowned addiction psychiatrist, also a neuroscientist. He's an associate professor at the School of Public Health and Medical School at Brown University, and he joined us by telephone today. And Doctor, good to talk with you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I imagine the last year has been even more involved for you than even previously, right? We've all been going through it with anxiety. Not you specifically,
Yes.
but people coming to you.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think we've seen one study showed a 287% increase in people screening positive for anxiety disorders just in the last year.
Yeah, and everybody, part of life is, anxiety from time to time, but anxiety disorder, that's an actual situation where there's something going on in your brain that you really need help with, right? It's not just, you're nervous for a few minutes. I mean, this is different, isn't it?
Yes, I would say we all get anxious, and when that's really causing severe disruptions of our daily and personal lives, that's when it falls into this more murky category of disorder. As much as I don't like that designation,
right.
I think of it as mental health as compared to mental disorders, but those are the diagnostic categories that we work with.
Yeah. Well, I had a chance to read through the book, and you really kind of explain it in a way that people like me can understand. I think that's the key to it, because the human brain and emotions are difficult to kind of really explain in everybody. But you have a lot of case studies and people that you talk to in the book that I think people are going to relate to. Is that how you kind of decided to put it together?
That was part of it, and also as a neuroscientist, I wanted to make sure the theories that I was putting forward actually bore true on a general population. So we did the clinical studies. We developed an app called Unwinding Anxiety and studied it. We got a 57% reduction in anxiety in anxious physicians. We got a 67% reduction in anxiety in people with generalized anxiety disorder. So after I saw those data and started to work out the mechanism of how this was working, and then also saw that it was helping a lot of my clinic patients who were really struggling for decades. That was the time where I decided, well, let's get this out there to anybody who wants to unwind their own anxiety.
And you talk about it in the book, how anxiety is, unfortunately, to use the word again, contagious. I mean, somebody feels that way, and if they're around other people, they tend to feel the same way, even if they're not anxious at the time, right? So it's that kind of thing. It kind of feeds on itself and other people around you, right?
It does. There's even a scientific term called social contagion, which highlights, how affect or emotion can be spread from one person to another. And that can happen, you don't have to be within 6 feet of somebody to catch their social contagion. Right. Anybody can sneeze on our brain from anywhere in the world via social media.
Yeah, I mean, again, social media has its good points, and obviously we've seen the not so good points. So that's one of them right there. You talk about habit loops. I thought that was an interesting terminology in the book, and you give several examples of it. Can you kind of give a quick rundown of what that is?
Yeah, this is a basic survival mechanism where our brains are designed to help us find food and avoid danger, and it takes only three elements to do that: a trigger, a behavior, and a reward from a neuroscience standpoint. So, for example, if we see food, we eat the food, and then there's the behavior, and our stomach sends this dopamine signal to our brain that says, "Remember what you ate and where you found it." Same is true for fear. If we see danger, we run away, and then we learn, "Oh, don't go back to there because that's a dangerous place." Well, anxiety can be formed in the same way. The feeling of anxiety can trigger the mental behavior of worry, and that mental behavior of worry makes us feel like we're doing something, and we feel like we're a little more in control. And that feeds back and makes us more anxious because it doesn't actually solve the problem or fix whatever the issue is.
Yeah, I know you talk in the book as well as, when you feel those feelings of anxiety, whatever you're doing. I think you have one in there about people, fear of flying or things like that. Try and recognize the feeling at that point, right? Isn't that the first step to kind of get over it and not just, the worry feeling, but exactly why you're feeling at that particular second, the fear?
Yes, and I think it's important to differentiate what anxiety feels like versus why am I anxious. I feel a lot of patients who get caught in these why habit loops where they try to figure out what it is, like why am I anxious, and then get stuck in trying to avoid those situations or dwell on something that's happened in the past. The key here is what is happening in my body, what is triggering the anxiety, and how am I relating to those sensations? How am I relating to those thoughts? Am I feeding them by worrying more? Or can I just notice those? Oh, there's that worry thought again, so that we're not caught up in that loop.
And the whole aspect of anxiety, you talk in the book, again, it's the prefrontal cortex of the brain. That's why people get kind of paralyzed. They don't do anything, and that's the reason, isn't it? I mean, that part of your brain is the one that kind of gets clogged up at the moment, and then you don't do anything, or it paralyzes you in a sense, right?
It does. The prefrontal cortex is a newer part of the brain, literally the neocortex, the new brain. And it's evolved to help us think and plan, yet it needs accurate information to do that. When we don't have accurate information, we start to get anxious as our brain kind of overheats. We're trying to think of all the worst case scenarios. And ironically, that's when our prefrontal cortex goes offline and we can't think anymore.
Yeah, it just kind of blocks out all the things you really don't have to think about. But at that point, you can't do anything because your brain is working on something else, right?
Yeah. Or it's kind of just spinning out in anxiety and worry.
Right. Well, I know we have limited time, but we want to give the audience a taste here of we've talked about what anxiety is. What can we do to overcome it? Can you give a tip or two? I know the book has so much in there, but what's the first thing you should do? Obviously, we've been dealing with this whole the last year. I guess it's about a year coming up this week of the pandemic and all that. I guess that's the main one, but other anxieties have crept in too that would be there even if we wouldn't have the pandemic, right? Obviously, the daily anxieties.
Yes. So I would say the first step is really mapping out how our habits are formed around anxiety, and are we developing new unhelpful habits like drinking more, eating more, distracting ourselves more. So we've actually put together a free habit mapper that people can download and start mapping out their habit list. mapmyhabit.com is the website, where that's the first step, is just start mapping out our habit loop. And that is already tremendously helpful because it illuminates our minds. It helps us see what we're doing so that we can then start to work with it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, analyzing it at the moment is probably the best thing you can do, because then when you're analyzing it, your brain is working on it rather than just letting it overwhelm you, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great tip there. And again, the name of the book is called Unwinding Anxiety. That's what we all want to do. And new science showing how to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your mind. And Judson Brewer has been our guest. I should say before, he also wrote a great book, The Craving Mind, helping people quit smoking. So I should have mentioned that before. That has been a very successful book for you. But Doctor, give out your website once again. People can get more information on the book.
Sure. It's drjud.com, drjud.com.
Great. Well, Doctor, I know you've probably been, as we say, been very busy the last year, but thank you for writing the book. I know it's going to help a lot of people, and hopefully we can talk to you again. But thanks for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.